May, several months after the second reversal of the water flow, Tonlé Sap has reached its lowest level. Rice fields and roads reappear, where before there was only water. The mud, which is omnipresent in this season, is not considered a problem, but a great treasure offered up by the lake. The sediment brought by the flood is deposited everywhere. This mixture of earth and water makes an ideal soil in which to grow rice. For the inhabitants of Tonlé Sap, a new life now begins. Fishing becomes a secondary activity carried out by children and old men. Yesterday's fishermen have put away their boats and turned into farmers for a season. There's no time to lose. Barely have the waters receded before they're working the soil, planting, and then harvesting. The few months before the next flood are just enough to ensure the yearly rice harvest. Kampong Phluk has emerged from the lake. The usually waterbound lake village can now be walked through. On either side of the village, a narrow muddy channel is all that remains of the Great Lake. The elevated Khmer houses are now only accessible by ladder. A few stubborn fishermen still ply their trade, but all the others have already opted for life on the land. Fishing biologist at the World Fish Center, Eric Baran has been carefully observing Tonlé Sap for almost 20 years. In between his research missions on the Mekong, the scientist regularly returns to check the health of the lake.
It's a real pleasure for me to come back now, because when we were here in August, the water reached all the way up to the houses. And now look at the difference. You can see all the fishing apparatus, the forest of wooden stilts. They're taking this opportunity to repair their fishing gear.
During the dry season, the inhabitants of Kampong Phluk devote a lot of time to the maintenance of their fishing equipment. Life on land kicks off again at the feet of the Spider House, and kids relearn how to ride their bikes. They play ball next to the prawns spread out to dry on the ground, on the very spot where a few months earlier they were swimming. Everyone makes the most of Tonlé Sap's low water season, of the time and space it gives them to carry out repairs on their homes, boats, and fishing nets.
There are just over 1 million people who really do depend on the water and the fishing. These people consume over 40 kilograms of fish each per year. That comes out at 100 grams per person per day, which shows to what extent this lake really does nourish an entire population. From an ecological point of view, it really is an exceptional lake. The surface area changes fivefold, and at its maximum, it is roughly the size of Corsica. Then when it shrinks to its minimum, it becomes extremely hard for the fish species to survive because it's so shallow. It goes from a depth of about 8 meters to just 1 meter, or even half a meter. The water gets very warm, and there's very little oxygen, so there are few species that can survive.
Besides small fry and prawns, which remain abundant, the sedentary blackfish species are still present in the lake. To catch them, there's no need of a net. A simple creel suffices. In this season, the flooded forest is one big quagmire. The fish that don't migrate bury themselves into the mud, where they're easy prey for as experienced a fisherman as Ku Yann.
I've caught a walking fish. It's a fish that survives in the mud. It's a really clever fish because it can adapt to both seasons. It can get around and move over land like that.
The changes that the lake undergoes have led to the striped shana evolving the ability to move about on land during the dry season. The amazing fish, which has both gills and a primitive lung, can breathe air and uses its fins to walk out of the water. Half aquatic, half terrestrial, it really is a perfect symbol for the inhabitants of Tonlé Sap. By stubbornly continuing to fish during the dry season, Ku Yann is something of an exception. Most of the villagers devote themselves during these months to their rice fields. It's also in the rice fields that most of Tonlé Sap's water snakes take refuge. This is where Nan T comes to hunt them. Considered one of Cambodia's top reptile experts, this scientist is here to study the effect that the intensive hunting of the past few months has had on these creatures.
Oh, this is a rainbow snake. This is a species that very common in Tonlé Sap and around Cambodia. Tonlé Sap is the place where you can find the most water snake, but we don't know how many there are in the world. Previous study recorded that 4 to 7 million water snakes has been hunted every year. People around Tonlé Sap, they harvest snake to sell for the crocodile farm, and because the crocodile farm is increasing, and they need water snake to feed the crocodile. And most water snake also collected for local consumption, for skin, for trade to neighboring country, export to China, export to Thai, export to Vietnam. People reported that they used to buy 50 kilograms from one place of water snake, but they only get 15 kilograms instead. That seems to be declined around 30%.
Another iconic creature of the region, the python, is today threatened with extinction, which could have serious consequences for the local human population.
Python in this area. Python very important in sustaining ecosystem in the food chain because python control rodent. Now, because the python hunted out and very rare now, and why python is very rare, rat a lot now increasing. And when the rat increasing, they damage or eat people crop that reduce the rice production every year.
Maybe
The uncontrollable proliferation of rats and other pests could turn out to be a very serious consequence of snakes disappearing from Tonlé Sap. At the height of the dry season, Phluk Toal village is unrecognizable. Resting on the muddy banks of the lake, the floating houses look strange in their immobile state. In the rare canals that still remain, the water can reach temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius. For Ku Yann, it's time to move his crocodiles onto the land. Transferring the creatures to their new habitat requires a great deal of care. It's a delicate operation. The crocodiles mustn't be hurt. And neither, of course, must their owner. The fisherman knows that the crocodiles will take advantage of their stay on land to reproduce, helping his lucrative farm to prosper.